So thank you for being here. I'll just start with me and then hand over to you, Lisa. So yes. I'm Lee Purvis and I am the PRCA coordinator even for Yorkshire. And it's marvellous to see so many people here today. And we've got a lot of enthusiasm about this. So I hope that everybody can take something away from it. And I'll hand over to you now, Lisa.
Yes, just the same. I'm the PRCA coordinator here at the Northwest. So we have different regions that we look after, and we work a day a week, although that's sometimes sort of spread across the week, organising events and other member activities. And at the moment, everything's obviously virtual. So yeah, I work in the world of PR as well, but I'm on maternity leave at the minute. So I've got a baby who's 11 weeks old, nearly 12 weeks old. My husband's just taking her for a walk. So
on it.
Well, do you know what? It took me forever to get ready this morning. You know, one of those where I like put her down, quick shower, then put some makeup on, and she had a nap. But thank you. So me and Lee, we know each other of old, actually. We went to university together. And we said that we wanted to join up and do some events across our region, because obviously we work together quite close, and Leeds is not very far from Manchester and the Northwest area that we cover here. And we were talking with our committee the other week that wanted to do some more sort of brand insight takeaways. So obviously the landscape at the minute is evolving really quickly. Things are changing rapidly. And I know a lot of our members are working at home. Some of them are obviously doing training courses, but actually sort of finding out what brands are doing and watching them from afar is great, but actually to get some insight into from you on the ground is really interesting. So Gemma's my cousin from Purplebricks, and a colleague Zoe, we've sort of said they would join us today, which is great. So hello to you both. I just thought it'd be great if you could give a very quick overview, both of you, of your sort of career background, and then just a little sort of intro into Purplebricks. I know most people sort of know them, but from your sort of side of things.
Perfect. Do you want to go first, Gem? Shall I?
You can go. There you go.
Or if anyone wants to put any questions on, just put them on the chat. We've got some, but pop them on, and we can ask them as we go through.
Okay, perfect. Well, my background is really very much PR. So pretty traditional route, really. I started off in agency, particularly Hill and Knowlton. Then I worked at Citygate, and I got headhunted by one of my clients to go in-house. So I was at PowerGen, which then became Eon. I was then at MFI for a couple of years, the furniture company, for those of you old enough to remember. Then I went to Npower, and I was there for 12, 13 years. And then I joined Purplebricks 2 years ago. So yeah, a real sort of retail and brand focus in my career. But now I look after PR and all external comms for Purplebricks.
Oh, I can fill in. Yeah. So I always say my career is a little bit of a squiggly one. So I started out my career in retail, so like retail management, and then moved quite quickly into the world of marketing. So that was about 10, 11 years ago now. So I started my kind of marketing career back at Sainsbury's, doing like campaign management, basically like through the line campaign management for those guys. And then I made the move to the Midlands, where I went into the fray of something quite different. So working for a brand called Claire's Accessories. So for those little girls, it's all the world of ear piercing. So very different to what I'm doing now. And that was kind of international marketing for those, looking after kind of 15 markets across Europe. And then also, like Zoe, had a little stint in the world of utilities, so working for a company called Canna Gas, and those of you might know them for the barbecues, but they also do like heating for people in the countryside. And then yeah, about just under 2 years ago, got the opportunity to come and work for Purplebricks. And for those that don't know, maybe I know Lisa was saying a bit about the brand, but don't know about Purplebricks. I mean, as a brand, we've only been around for 6 years now. So a relatively new brand. And for me, I'd always worked for very traditional brands before coming over to Purplebricks. So I really wanted to kind of get a bit of an experience of working for what was effectively a startup, and still kind of has a bit of that startup mentality, even though we're kind of on our road to being a grown up, as we say internally. But in terms of like Purplebricks as a proposition and what we do, so we're effectively known as a hybrid estate agent. So we have local property experts, for want of a better word, they're estate agents. So estate agents dotted around the country, but they're not based in branches. So they're based in the communities, basically. So they just don't have the bricks and mortar that you have with estate agents, but with high street estate agents. But from a tech perspective, we've got this fantastic app, and that's what really kind of puts us apart from the rest of the high street. Really, which is a great way really for people to be able to transact with us. Yeah, so that's the brand in a nutshell, a whistle stop tour. But so thank you for the intro. We can tell you a little bit more about what we do in a second. But
yeah, that's great. You both have really interesting careers, and I do remember MFI. When did they go? When was that? I can't remember now.
Well, do you know, I think they're still vaguely available online. Somebody bought the brand and took it over. But I left, gosh, when did I leave? 2005, and I think they were still no, it was way before that actually. So anyway, I don't know. I don't know. They took a while to run down, but there was, when I was there was like 250 stores around the country, so it was a big thing at the time.
Yeah. Gosh, seems not long ago. If I kick off with the first question. So obviously we're in the midst still of this pandemic, whatever we're calling it now. And obviously for comms and marketing people, you very much focused on strategy and planning. And I know that you were looking forward to obviously the year of the Olympics this year. When obviously this sort of started to hit our shores back in maybe February time, how did you sort of react to what was happening, and how quickly did you sort of adapt your marketing and comms? I imagine that was quite a challenge, and obviously the Olympics was still maybe talked about at that point, but then I think a bit further down the line it all got postponed. So what did you do? What were the sort of steps that put in place?
Jen, maybe if I talk about what we did sort of internally in the structure, and then you pick up on Team GB maybe.
Yeah,
so
cool.
So I mean, obviously when it happened, the big focus really was business continuity and how were we going to pivot the business. I think we were probably much better placed than huge amounts of companies. So as Gemma said, we have a head office with a contact center and 300-400 people there, but all our local property experts are working from home already and based from home and based in their regional areas. So that gave us kind of a natural advantage, as did the fact that obviously we're a digital company. So again, there are two sort of advantages where we're used to working digitally, and a lot of our, the main people who go out and for customer facing are already remote. So that helped. But there was a real, I say scramble, because I'm sure you all remember, it was just daily updates. We were literally, and I remember right at the beginning, we had sort of an hour meeting a day. And then gradually we just ended up being in the room, the sort of crisis boardroom constantly, because it was just, you were just literally waiting for updates all the time from government about what was okay. But pretty quickly we realized we'd have to find a way of having all our people at home. And we had that sort of dilemma where we knew some functions like marketing and legal could easily move to work from home, because we often did, but it felt unsafe and unfair that people who were in their contact center would still have to travel and come into work. So we very quickly did an audit of our staff to understand, could people work from home? What Wi-Fi did they have? What kit did they need? And that was really useful to have that view. And then very quickly, within a week, we got everybody working from home, and we had time to do a few test days. So we took some small groups test days and got everyone working from home ahead of the lockdown. So that was kind of how, from a business perspective, we pivoted. But Jen, if you want to pick up on Team GB and the Olympics, because that was quite a big change as well.
Yeah, obviously, we were uber excited about the Olympics. So we'd signed as a partner in July last year with Team GB. So we were really excited as a brand, obviously, to get the opportunity to partner with Team GB. They're one of the most trusted organisations in the country. And we'd filmed a lot of content. So we'd filmed all of our TVCs, like our AV content, in the autumn of last year, and that had started to play out in January. So hopefully some of you saw it on the TV at the start of the year. So all of those ads have been made very much a lot of them have been filmed in the Northwest. So we filmed quite a bit of it up in the Manchester area. So that's where Laura Kenny's based, for those that know Laura Kenny. So yeah, we filmed that content, it was served out, and then obviously we started to get wind of the fact that the Olympics might potentially move. And for us, the content we were serving out at that particular point in time, it just didn't feel tonally quite right. But we still wanted to find a way to support Team GB, basically, in terms of on this extended road to Tokyo. So we looked at, and also at that point in time as well, I think it's probably in my comment in a second, but at that point in time, obviously from the property market, as Zoe said, obviously we can be able to continue to transact with people, but from, I don't know what the date was, so it was it the 22nd of March, something like that, where we weren't able to then go into people's homes anymore as estate agents, so we could still transact virtually with people. So that also then gave us an idea really for a content platform around how do we elevate across internally and externally our virtual proposition. So that then led on to the creative that you might have seen over the summer period. So we then worked with Team GB, the athletes, and the production company that had previously created some content, the TV content for us, to look at some Zoom style executions. So the same director with filming with the athletes who were all in their homes. So one was filmed at his mother-in-law's house, the other one in his back garden, and one of the athletes was filmed in her garage. We'd had to send all the kit out to them remotely as well, because obviously we couldn't go anywhere near them because of at that point, obviously we weren't able to interact with anyone at all. And athletes even now are all training in their bubbles. But that also gave us two things really from a brand point of view. We were able to kind of show continuity in terms of that support for Team GB, but also to kind of highlight through the creative that we had around the virtual proposition. So it kind of worked both ways for us. One, to, like I say, show the solidarity with Team GB, and a little bit of a nod also to the virtual world that we're still all living in now. Obviously, it's cool, it's exactly the same as it was when we filmed the ads in the summer, but also being able to, like I say, show the kind of virtual proposition.
Great, thank you. I've got a question, if that's okay. Obviously you talked about creativity there, and I know from something we did with our members recently, creativity was quite a big theme that became apparent, and lots of discussion around that. So how have you kept so creative during this time? Because obviously the campaign's been quite creative. How have you kept the creative thought processes going? What motivates you to be creative and come up with these ideas and concepts?
Well, I was going to say, I think a lot is the channels you use to still talk to each other. So we're in touch with each other almost, all the time. And a lot, I mean, you could use WhatsApp for it. We use Workplace by Facebook, and we have a chat group on there. So we're often sharing ideas, sharing examples of campaigns we've seen, sharing what other brands are up to. And then also just sparking ideas off each other. And I guess the key thing is that you're right, there is a sort of extroverts, as we types tend to be, don't we? Sort of PR and comms types tend to really thrive off that community spirit. And it's definitely been harder, and I think been a challenge. But I think you just need to constantly talk and constantly stay in touch, because you can't, I find it almost impossible to be creative on my own in a room. So
yeah, completely agree. And I think just also, I guess, from a brand point of view as well, actually in terms of the personality of the communications, because I'm sorry, it's a slightly different point, but it's kind of linked really. We were quite nervous when we were going into the summer around what type of content we should be putting out. As we talk about creativity, I think it's staying true to whatever your brand is, in terms of the true beliefs. And for us, we've always had quite a witty personality as a brand, and that was a real nervousness, like I say, heading into summer, like, should we continue to kind of still have a little bit of a joke with people, because obviously we're in the middle of a global pandemic. So tonally, you can see some of the ads were probably stripped back from where we were 12 months ago, but we still wanted to kind of stay true to ourselves, but obviously stay empathetic to the pandemic that we're still in. So, and I think that's important for brands, really, not to forget that, because people need a bit of a lift right now,
I know you do. I think even more so now as we go into like whatever next phase and different tiers across the country, and we head towards Christmas, and that's all slightly changing, isn't it? And Halloween and everything. We need that personality and some fun, some laughter out there.
Yeah, and it is hard, because I think there were also brands that did get panned for not getting it right. So Gemma's right, there was definitely that sort of nervousness of putting a foot wrong and being seen to be insensitive, or being seen to completely misjudge the mood of the nation. And I think there was definitely a period where everything was changing so quickly week by week. I remember seeing, I can't remember the examples now, but I remember a few things that happened where some brands got absolutely criticised, and if they'd done it a week earlier or a week later, it would have probably been fine, but they just went to that exact wrong moment where it just felt totally tone deaf. So yeah, there was definitely that nervousness of, as I say, not misjudging the mood of the nation.
We've got a question actually here from Emma Trimble, who's from Brazen, actually, who's our vice chair of the Northwest one. She just popped up, said, how was business during lockdown? Do you think that your comms were effective at that time? And did you rely on social media more?
I'll do the beginning bit, Jenna, if you then pick up later again. Should we do that? So, I mean, business during lockdown was hard. There's no doubt about that. As Gemma said, we were lucky in that we could still operate as an estate agent virtually, which most estate agents couldn't at all. But were customers thinking about putting their house on the market during lockdown? Pretty much no. And I think the only ones we were really probably dealing with new inquiries were people who had no choice whatsoever but to move. So it absolutely wasn't on people's agenda at that point. And how moving is, you know, based very closely to consumer confidence, and I don't think many people were feeling confident during lockdown. And then of course when the housing market came back, which it did incidentally with 24 hours or less notice, I always say garden centres had 4 weeks notice and we had about 12 hours. But the floodgates were unlocked and we've seen a massive increase, and we had some of our sort of really strongest weeks as a result of lockdown coming out. So it was hard, and we did have to furlough some staff, and we did look at you know, cutting any kind of external costs that we could, and, you know, stopping that flow of money out of the business, which I think was the sort of right thing to do. In terms of comms during that time, again, it was tricky. We did everything we could to look after our people, whether that we at one point sent everyone, you know, a box of brownies. We did quite a few fun things like a pub quiz, virtual pub quiz, but then I'm sure, you know, huge amounts of brands did that. But the main thing we tried to do is just keep people really informed. Because I think maybe from an employer, although we were trying to be fun and upbeat at times, actually what they wanted was information. They wanted to know what was going to happen to them. They wanted to know if their jobs were secure. They wanted to know, you know, what was the plan for the business. So we did a combination of 4 weekly Q&As with our senior leadership team, which was a half an hour session where we were updating, and then a half an hour of open questions. People could ask anything they liked. And then we also did videos, particularly from our CEO, pretty much on a weekly basis, just giving people a view of what was happening. Because I think what we felt a lot was that you missed all that kind of water cooler moments, or just bumping into someone. And certainly for sort of people maybe lower down the organisation, they were having zero sight of the leadership team, and we really wanted to keep them sort of feeling connected. Jem, if you want to pick up on social media.
Yeah, so I guess it's probably slightly broader than social media. So I think when it came to the depths of lockdown in late March, we took the decision from a paid media point of view to switch the majority of our more expensive channels, like your TV and radios of this world, off at that point, because at that point in time, as Zoe said, the opportunities for us to transact were more limited. But what we did keep open was our digital channels. So for those that were actively in market, things like social retargeting, PPC, etc. So, and all of our organic channels, all of that activity just maintained throughout that period. So when it came to the 20-something of May, when the market opened up again, it meant that from a budget point of view, we conserved some spend. So we were able to, sort of working with media owners as well, they were very kind and enabled us to pause a lot of activity, so that then we were able to turn that all back on again and create some efficiencies then really when we heading into the summer.
Good. And in terms of, obviously we've got, our membership is very wide, but we have a lot of agencies. And I know you've got quite a big sort of in-house team, haven't you, of comms and marketing and social media. Do you have a lot to put
we haven't really. We're about as leaner department as one could get, to be honest. We're less than 10 in marketing and comms, and that's, I mean, it's pretty lean. So for example, in PR, there's myself and one other person, which is about as lean as you can get. So yeah, no, I wouldn't say we're a very big in-house team.
It's quite small then, isn't it? Yeah, for just such a big brand. Do you work with agencies then? And did you continue to obviously work with them throughout the pandemic and at present? And did you find that sort of relationship obviously sort of fruitful through the last few months, really?
I mean, I'll get my words out in a second. In terms of our agencies, I think I treat them as being as part of the team. So when we say about it being a big team, actually, yes, centrally we are quite a lean team, but massively reliant, but in a good way, on our creative media and PR agencies. And they've all built a really great relationship as well throughout lockdown as well. So we often have this is how we interact nowadays. And I find also, certainly from a time point of view, we're a lot more efficient. So I was spending 2 days a week pretty much going down to London, which is where the media and creative agencies are both based, liaising with them regularly, whereas now we probably talk a lot more than we did before, purely because we're all just now accustomed to dealing with each other in this way. So actually, I'd say those relationships, I think, in a weird way, have kind of strengthened as a result of it.
And from a PR perspective, as Gemma said, we're very close and all sort of work in a very integrated way. So we use the PR network, who, I don't know if you guys know them, but they're a group of sort of freelancers, associates who work together, and we found that incredibly useful during lockdown, because again, their whole model is that if we suddenly need an expert in sponsorship or suddenly need a financial or corporate, support, we can literally dip into that and they can bring new associates on board. And also, as Gemma was talking about earlier, what we've tried to do is kind of move to more content creation, because we've focused more on social. So a lot of the PR has then been lending itself to social, to internal. So there's been this sort of real blending of content moved across all the channels.
Thank you. We've got a question here from Charlotte as well. So you mentioned a Q&A for the teams. How did they work, and were they well received, or did the leadership team get a tough time? And also, how did you manage team resilience with the pace and hours of the work?
So let's do the first bit first. Gemma, maybe you do the resilience and team bit. So we, as I said earlier, we use Workplace by Facebook. And how is quite a practical answer, but what you can do is we did a Zoom call, so it looked like this with the leadership team, so you could see the leadership team here, and then the Zoom call was pushed live onto Workplace, so because there's an integration between the two. So what it meant that was that we would all be here doing a presentation, and then we already did call out for questions ahead of time. So I would then sit with a sort of list of questions ready to go. But then also people could put questions in the comments live as it happened. So the way it was tended to be structured is you would have our CEO probably do a 5 to 10 minute update. We tried to keep it quite interesting by having some guest speakers. So for example, we had Zoopla come in, we had various sort of housing experts anyway, but useful for our organisation. And then people from around the business come in and talk about areas and updates. And then that was probably usually half an hour. And then we would open it to questions. They didn't get a hard time to some degree. No, I don't think anybody was rude, or, there was never any sort of aggression. There were questions that we couldn't answer. So for example, we did furlough people and we topped people up. It was a generous furlough and people were well looked after. But a lot of the time people were saying, well, when will furlough end? When will we be brought back? And of course we just didn't know. And, it was all just so dependent on the national lockdown and the government strategy around the housing market. The people we furloughed were sort of demand-led people who were handling volume coming in, and if there was just no volume coming in, it just made complete sense to use the furlough scheme. So there were definitely questions we couldn't answer, but I guess the point there is to always just be honest and say, look, we just don't know, we can't, but we still put the questions to the leadership team. We never sort of denied those questions, and everybody was free and could see the questions being asked. So I think there was just the honesty there, which people appreciated. So yeah, it was tricky because obviously people wanted that information. But as I say, I think as long as you're open and transparent and people can see that you're trying to share as much as you can, that was all we could really do. Jem, do you want to pick up the team element?
Well, I guess there's a couple of elements in terms of the resilience piece. One of the things that, and Zoe, this is probably closer to your area here, but one of the things that we were able to borrow from, I guess, from the natural link that we've got with Team GB is through our relationship with Team GB, we've got an internal engagement program as well. So they were very kind in terms of continuing, because what Zoe and the team had previously run is a really great in-person engagement program. So they used to come into the office, do a lot of activities with us, and that from the point of lockdown was flipped to kind of more virtual support. So there's lots of things in terms of mental well-being tips that they were doing. We've had like yoga sessions with Olympians, etc. So I think the kind of softer side of stuff is still really, really important, to continue, particularly right now from a mental health point of view. Obviously people have been in lockdown for over 6 months, so obviously becoming particularly, like I said, particularly important. But from a team point of view, across the marketing team and how we interact, I'm so grateful for this platform that we've got, Facebook Workplace. And for those that don't know it, I would really recommend checking it out, because we use that. I mean, we kind of use it as a replacement for things like WhatsApp, daily, every single morning in the marketing team. I mean, we've just had this, basically we just live by GIFs, I'm not going to lie. So I think it's really important from a team morale point of view, to keep the same kind of chat, because I think often, because we're in this digital environment, environment. People forget the need to have that 5 minutes at the start of the day. What what did you do last night? What did you have for tea? All the stuff that you quickly move on from because you're in this world. So I think that particular, like I say, has been a real help for us. But also, we've got some project management tools as well, because I think in terms of the pace and, like I say, the number of projects and things popping up all the time, we use a project management tool called Asana, which has been a lifesaver during a lockdown, because from a marketing calendar point of view, we're able to, kind of physically all jump into this project management tool, all assign tasks. So I can see exactly what Zoe's working on. So if there is a campaign that me and Zoe are working on together, that I know exactly what I'm due to do on a certain day. I know where Zoe's at from a progress point of view. We know what's going on, with the rest of the members of the marketing team. And I don't know how we would have operated without something like that in the last few months to kind of keep on top of projects as they move so quickly at the moment.
Yeah, but just to add though, I think it's just worth calling out that it has been really tough for everyone. I think we found it really hard, and I suppose it's important just to acknowledge that it's not all been easy. And I think we've had a lot of conversations about feeling more isolated, and I think an expression I keep using is that you're just much more in your own thoughts. So that whereas normally if something's bothering you, if you've had a tricky meeting or been challenged about something, you'd come out of that into another meeting, go for coffee with Gemma, have a chat, maybe bump into the senior leader who maybe challenged you on something the next day and have a big chat about his kids, and then you feel like great again. But if you don't see that senior leader until 3 weeks' time, you're like, oh gosh, are they concerned about that? Are they concerned about my performance? So you do have those worries. And I just think it's, as Gemma has said, all you can do is really keep close to your colleagues and air those concerns, I think.
That's really interesting. I can totally understand that. And I think the media is quite an interesting forum at the moment. How would you say that you think the media's responded to your work during the last few months?
I don't think there's been a sort of marked shift, to be honest. I think we've changed our approach quite a bit. So up until quite recently, Purplebricks' sort of overarching marketing strategy was basically to spend huge amounts of money on TV advertising and quite a lot on, pay-per-click and that type of, but we didn't do huge amounts of activity around PR and social. And I think we're really starting to change that. And that's worked well for us. And we can definitely see more positivity on social and chatter. So I think people are responding well to it, but I don't think that the only big change I would note is that it's very hard to get hold of our journalists at the moment. So when we're doing sell-ins, when we're trying to follow up with stories, obviously journalists are already stretched or already challenged, but we've definitely noticed it's even harder to get hold of them, that it's really having to all be done by email. So that's I suppose a really practical challenge, but I don't think we've seen a massive shift in media attitudes to us.
That's interesting.
That's interesting. We've had a lot of feedback about not being able to get hold of journalists, and exactly the same. And actually, that's something we're coming on to in a couple of weeks with PRCA Northwest as well. And what about campaigns and other brands that have inspired you during the past 6 months? Which ones have? And you can say which ones haven't.
Yeah. Well, Gemma and I, you go Gemma, but we're both very big fans of Brewdog, aren't we?
Stolen mine, but yeah, it's fine. Yeah, we are massive.
No, you go for it, honestly. You go for Brewdog. I've got a couple of other thoughts.
Well, I think it's using brands like them as an example. They're just brands that have not lost their personality throughout the whole of lockdown. Obviously, they're really quick to react. Their social media presence is amazing, but they translate that through to their product as well. Obviously, there was the whole Barnard Castle eye test way back in, that was the link to Specsave as well, but they had the Barnard Castle beer. Then they had not long ago, obviously, their Aldi trying to do a knockoff version of their beer, and they quickly turned that round in a matter of weeks. And I think you've got other brands as well. So for me, brands like KFC. So not that I should be eating lots of KFC, having been in lockdown for 6 months now, but but from a comms point of view, I think, again, they've not lost their personality. Little things that they did with one of the campaigns that they've ran in the last few weeks that you might have seen, where obviously with their strapline being finger licking good, and they've had to remove that temporarily because of the latest pandemic. So there's a nod there to, we're aware of the situation, but without losing that personality. And for me, I think they're the brands that, you know, and all the research we're seeing at the moment is everyone wants a little bit of escapism right now in their comms. So if you focus heavily on, which like Zoe was saying, at the start of lockdown, I think it was important when the supermarkets, so I also think, did a fantastic job of just being really clear at that point of, if you're going to a supermarket now, this is how it's going to roll. You're going to have to queue outside, and you're going to have to, you know, wear a mask and all of that. And it was important as a part of their comms. But I think at this stage in the pandemic, like I say, I think people need a little bit of a lift right now.
The other point I was just going to pick up on is that I think brands that have been seen to be kind and been seen to be decent have just obviously done really well. So there's a lot of the stuff that Gemma referred to, which is the really clever, savvy people like Brewdog who, you know, are just getting it so right. But then there's brands like Timpson's who do almost like next to no PR and, you know, advertising, no marketing department, but they just seem to just get it right because they're decent. And I think there's been this big shift or increase in value of just being a kind, decent brand has got its own sort of resonance now. And people really, you know, there was a lot of comments about brands that behave badly during this time will really, you know, suffer and regret it. And people will remember how brands behave. And I think there's that sort of, from a reputational point of view, just being seen to be decent and do the right thing has never been more important.
I think it's so true. And I think on the back of, you know, not to get into a debate about this, but yesterday about the, when the children can't afford the meals or the parents the meals, and I just was looking through Twitter this morning, which I find really useful for work, and I always find that quite a good engagement tool with journalists actually at the moment. But so many brands that I know offering to give free meals, and restaurants, you know, really struggling at this moment in time here in Manchester, that now we're into tier 3, are still offering to say, if you know your child can't afford a meal, come in. And I think it is reacting quite quickly, isn't it? And it's nice to see that personality come through that's really true and authentic as well.
Just those little touches. There was the restaurant, wasn't there, where you could, in fact, loads of restaurants in Worcester doing this, where you can buy a coffee in a head and then pay with a post-it note. Have you seen that, where you just take a post-it note and somebody's already paid? Just those really kind touches. I think that's what matters. And it's a overused word, but the authenticity of just actually caring seems to make be where the brands that have got that right are really doing well.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. And kindness, you know, particularly when we're going around wearing masks. And I seen something the other day online about this poor old guy going to the supermarket. He goes in every day, and just to have a bit of a chat with people, and he's got to wear a mask, and he's just finding human life so hard. It is really important, all different levels. In terms of sort of going back to your world that you're in property, what do you think's next in the property market? Where's that going? What's the reaction been like you've touched on it a little bit with consumers over the past few months. What do you think consumers want from Purplebricks going forward as a brand, or from other people in the property world as well? Is there anything that's kind of become quite apparent?
Well, the big thing that I'm kind of concerned with at the moment is the stamp duty holiday. So normally a pattern in estate agency would be that January is our, you know, biggest month, and because of, you know, people feeling fed up during Christmas and sort of wanting to get away, I guess, or at least reassess how they live. But it's going to be very different this year. So I'm sure you all know, but obviously we had the stamp duty holiday announced, and our view on that would be that's great in loads of ways, that it was really stimulated interest. So we already had one sort of big increase in demand from the pent-up demand in lockdown, to then have the stamp duty holiday come in. We definitely saw a lot of people who maybe couldn't have afforded to go onto the market, or maybe couldn't get a mortgage because they didn't have a big enough deposit, come onto the market because of stamp duty. So that's great, and we're really pleased that's happened. But we definitely have a concern of what's going to happen when come the 31st of March, because there is this my analogy that everybody laughs at me for using, but you know, when you see a boa constrictor eat something that's too big, there are these two big lumps being progressed down the boa constrictor, and it's taking a while for that to get through. And basically what our worry is that come the 31st of March, there'll be a lot of people who are very disappointed if they went onto the market because of the stamp duty holiday and they haven't had time to complete and benefit from it. So we are saying to the government, we think that stamp duty holiday should be extended between 6 to 12 months. because of these, there is extra demand in the system, sort of 40% more volume in the system at the moment than there would normally be. Obviously, any deadline is always going to have sort of winners and losers who fall either side of it, but there's just so many extra people in the system at the moment and not the capacity there to process them. So that'll be really interesting to see what happens and see whether that stamp duty holiday does get moved. So I guess from a sort of more, again, reputational point of view, that's something we're really focusing on and hoping that we can help customers in that sense.
Yeah.
We've had,
sorry, go on. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, sorry, I was going to say, I don't know if Gemma had any views on sort of wider trends that we're seeing with customers and areas they'd like support with. We've talked about virtual viewings quite a lot, haven't we, for example?
Yeah, I mean, that is probably one of the, obviously you'll see across all of our communications that we've put recently that we're seeing this, we are seeing a trend in people looking for virtual valuations and viewings, which you wouldn't necessarily have seen so much of last year. So I think there's a combination of people just feeling more comfortable with technology than we probably did 12 months ago, because this is how we're all interacting with each other now. And there's obviously still an element of safety concern out there from people. But I think we're also seeing trends in the property market around what people want out of a property. So, you know, who would have thought 12 months ago we'd be talking about home offices, you know? So, because with a lot of us still, you know, I'm working out of an upstairs bedroom and so on. So I think a lot of us are now, if we're thinking that we're going to be working from home a lot more moving forward, or more flexible working, then, you know, the types of properties that we're looking for, slight escape from, you know, kind of bigger urbanization. If you've got, you know, if you're able to then work from home a bit more and not have to go into commute into the city, then, you know, there's some people that are able to now go and live that rural dream that maybe they didn't think was achievable. So yeah, some interesting stuff that, like I say, you wouldn't have seen a year ago that's the pandemic has triggered.
We've had a question from Emma again saying, do you think there's been a property boom across the whole of the UK? Everything has gone bonkers in Manchester and there's so much competition. What she said, oh, I might have just answered my question, Emma. But do you think there has been? I mean, there's been lots of different talk about that.
House prices are definitely on the rise completely. And I think across the UK, you're looking around 5% on average. The only two places where house prices haven't gone up, in fact, they've dropped, particularly is Aberdeen because of the oil and gas industry. And which is lucky because we nearly bought a house in Aberdeen. My husband works in oil and gas a couple of years ago. So they've actually fallen there. And then very central London because of people wanting to maybe get out and have more space. But yeah, Manchester is a big one, Birmingham, but Leeds, but also in the sort of various southern counties as well. I think, as Gemma said, what we're seeing is people wanting more space, more gardens, and maybe also the idea we've talked quite a lot about as a company that, look, you know, if you're only going to ever have to be asked back into work 2 days a week, for example, you would accept a longer commute. So maybe you'll look more widely about where you want to live. But it's tricky with the housing market. That people are saying is it a sort of boom or bust? I don't think it's a boom in the traditional sense that these prices are skyrocketing upwards and will come crashing down. There have been various predictions that prices may begin to come down next year after the stamp duty, but, you know, only a sort of a few percent. So I don't think we're in this sort of crazy boom and sort of with a big sort of bust sitting waiting for us on the other side.
It's interesting what you said before, because I know there's been a lot of talk in the press about people moving further away, sort of realising, particularly from the city centre or around that sort of area around the city in London, Manchester, Birmingham, wherever it may be, suddenly looking, actually, I can move out to the countryside and my job for the foreseeable, I can work from there. So that will be probably an interesting trend, won't it? That I'm sure. Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at Purplebricks ourselves, I don't think we will ever probably go back to 5 days in the office ways of working. I think people have really enjoyed the freedom it gives. And there is definitely a sense of wanting both, you know, flexible so that obviously we can get together. But I think we may end up with office spaces that are more designed for team working and collaboration days, coming together, as we've talked about at the beginning, for the creative process, but not actually ever going back to expecting most people in the office most of the time.
Yeah, I can see that.
I've just got a quick question. So when it comes to understanding brands going forward and repositioning them, what process would you recommend that we go through?
Oh gosh, good question. Well, I guess in terms of understanding, you're talking about your own brands. I guess the most important thing is understanding what the customer needs at the ultimate end of the day, and being empathetic to the changes of customer needs over time as well. So constantly keeping on the finger of the pulse of that. So I know Lisa talked about social media and Twitter earlier on. So, you know, things like we've implemented in the last 12 months, some more robust kind of social listening tools as well. So we're able to constantly monitor that. So we have like regular things like brand tracking that we do every few months and more qualitative in-depth research, but just that, you know, constantly, like I say, keeping that finger on the pulse of the mood of the nation is incredibly important.
Thank you.
I think, has anybody got any more questions to ask? I'm just conscious of obviously time. Anything else popped up? No? I think Lee, you're gonna ask the last question we've got on our list.
We've got quite a lot of questions still on our list, but I'm very conscious of time. So yes, so we talk about the future and the future landscape and it being a little unpredictable. How are you going to plan your marketing and comms moving forward then?
Well, yeah. So I was just going to say it's interesting because we're starting to plan for the Olympics next year with the hope that it will go ahead. I mean, my view would be that all you can do is plan, but just remain very agile. As we've said, as Gemma says, you listen to customers and obviously keep a very close eye on what's going in the news and respond. But at the same time, I think, you know, you can't let that sort of stultify you into not doing anything, you know. So with the Olympics we're planning, and we have a big campaign planned around sort of getting the nation behind the athletes. But as an example there, normally we'd be looking to do maybe some school engagement and visits to schools with Olympians, just as one example. And obviously we've no idea if that will be possible. We've no idea quite how the Olympics is going to work. So yeah, I think you have to plan and go ahead, but with that awareness that you will always have to be ready to pivot on a sixpence if something changes.
Thank you.
Any more from you, Gemma?
Oh no, I was going to just echo what Zoe said, is that basically we've lived through the last six months of having a plan B for pretty much everything that we do, and it's the same for next year as well. We've got to constantly, and that's working across creative, media and PR, all three of our kind of agency network, and that's where that collaboration is really, really important there as well, so that we can flip if we need to. So it's meaning a little bit more work, I think, from all sides, because we're having to do multiple plans. But I think in the world that we're living in right now, that's still important, you know, to kind of plan ahead for next year, that they're with the ever-changing landscape we're working in the property market, and like Zoe said, around what the landscape of the Olympics could look like, we need to have different options on the table.
And it'd be great to have the Olympics, and it's former glory, but who knows what will happen. I'm hearing all sorts of things of different brands, concerts. Did you see there was a concerts and bubbles? Was it the Flaming Lips or something? And having people watching and bubbles. And there's just all these new innovative ways of doing things. So who knows what the Olympics will be like? Probably with nobody watching.
Yeah,
like I said, we don't know at the moment. Obviously, the guys at the BOA are working. I think they're still working through, because you know, I think, mind you, in Japan itself, they have been holding live sports events. So they've had stadiums with people in. So maybe it might just be the home crowd that's there. It might be just the Japanese.
Yeah, and the Lions tour's just been given the go ahead in Japan next year. So they're obviously thinking, you know, big sporting events can happen. So, you know, our view is it will definitely happen, touch wood. It may just, as you say, have to adapt and be done in a different way, I think.
Which is why, like,
Sorry.
Oh no, it's just like say why the home support element is so important for us, you know, to kind of be the ones that are cheering them on back home when, you know, we can't go to Tokyo. Would have been too expensive to fly to Tokyo anyway.
We didn't want to go, did we, Gemma?
No, of course not. No, we didn't want to go to Tokyo.
That's not
bitter at all.
Well, if there's no more questions, I just want to say from me and Lee and the PRCA, it's great to have you with us today, chatting.